Mastering music isn't as difficult as it's made out to be. You don't need to watch 10-hour tutorial compilations or spend countless hours scouring the internet for information. I'm going to show you everything that you need to know to make a great master, and we'll do it in 10 minutes. This is the only music mastering video you'll ever need. Let's start by understanding why mastering exists. So mastering is pretty simple. The job is to balance the frequency response in a way that best represents the song, increase the perceived loudness while preserving dynamics, and establish a balance between differing info in the left and right channels and identical info in the left and right channels. If you could do all that well, that's 90% of making a great master. And you don't really need complex tools. A fully parametric mid-side EQ to control the frequency response and images, a saturator and/or RMS compressor to control dynamics and fill the frequency response, an upward processor to bring up quieter details while retaining peaks, and a versatile limiter is all you really need. The goal is to make each filter, each change, each setting effective. This way we don't have to add more processors than necessary. The more conflicting processing you have, the more you need to use another processor to undo what you did with the last one, and the more processed and unpleasant the sound becomes. So let's talk about creating a chain. The chain we're creating is simple, with each plugin doing its part well. First is an EQ to balance the frequency response before processing. Next, we'll control the RMS or average loudness with this free Kotelnikov compressor. This reduces the need for peak compression later on. Upward processing and saturation comes next. For a cleaner master, just the upward processor will work since it adds some mild saturation. If you want more distortion, then introduce the saturator and then use the upward processor. The inflator is great for bringing up quieter details, but each one of these plugins has a unique character. The knee function of Vintage Warmer 2 is a personal favorite. The MM1 maximizer is also a great option. Now with the dynamics controlled and quieter details brought up, we'll control the tonal balance with broad EQ filters. Then the limiter will introduce the last bit of loudness while controlling peaks in a way that doesn't change the timbre. Now I'll show each one of these steps in more detail, but for now, let's take a listen to the before and after with each processor enabled one at a time. For the first insert, we're going to balance with EQ. So before we introduce any processing that could amplify more of something that we don't want, let's balance the frequency response. When mastering, a linear phase EQ is a good idea. If kept to a low latency setting, the pre-ringing distortion is very minimal and affects transients less than a zero latency EQ. With it, attenuate the side image lows with a high-pass filter. Since we're using linear phase, we could use a 18 dB or 24 dB per octave filter without messing up the phase rotation. Now I recommend increasing this filter to somewhere between the fundamental range and the second order harmonic range. This will make everything below that filter identical in the left and the right channels. A small dip in the low mids, around 250 Hz, will reduce masking to higher frequencies and reduce any muddiness present in the mix. Then I'll find some resonances in the high mids. The vocals' nasal resonances and other instruments will typically make this area too busy, so a small dip helps. Now, of course, this will vary between songs, but these filters are almost always useful when balancing a track before subsequent processors. Next up, we have RMS compression. So when compressing a master, the goal is to not be able to hear it. I want to achieve about a dB to 2 dB of attenuation and a mix of peak and RMS detection. This Kotelnikov compressor is free and it lets you blend peak and RMS compression. I'm going to set it to almost complete RMS compression, but then control a small amount of the peaks as well. With these settings, you shouldn't be able to hear compression whatsoever, other than it's lower in volume. By controlling the peaks and the RMS so subtly, the limiter that we use at the end of the chain won't have to attenuate more than a few dB. This is going to keep the limiter from sounding too noticeable, so it's really more of a practical insert that we're using at this point. Let's take a quick listen to the EQ and RMS compressor being introduced. Notice that the first EQ helps balance the response, and that the compressor doesn't make much of an audible change. Next up, let's introduce some upward processing. So introducing upward processing is kind of a game changer. It's often skipped, but when combined with saturation and limiting, it helps bring up detail and create a loud sound without the need for heavy limiting. Now, saturation reshapes the peaks. Limiting ideally retains the peak shape entirely and uses clean gain to attenuate them when it's needed. Upward processing reshapes the wave from the quietest points up, which typically retains the timbre and the impact of transients, while again increasing loudness. Now, each upward processor shapes a little differently, which means they introduce unique harmonics. So let's listen to the Oxford Inflator and then the Vintage Warmer 2 using the knee function, and we'll see which one complements the track better. Real quick, Sage Audio is an audio mastering service. We've been mastering with an all-analog signal path for 20 years now and offer mastering for $49 per track. There's more info at the end of the video if you're interested. Next up, let's introduce our tone shaping EQ. So this is the fun part of mastering in my opinion. This is when the dynamics are balanced, details are up, and now we can add everything that we want more of. Again, I'll set the EQ to a low latency linear phase setting. Also, I'll use another side image high-pass filter. You might notice that the processing we used introduced info back into the side image of the lows, so it helps to clean that up at this point. Now, as I said before, it varies from song to song, but a dip in the low mids helps if needed, then a boost in the lows and the high mids helps a lot. In the mid-range, a side image bell makes the stereo image more impressive without creating an unbalanced frequency response. The air frequencies could be boosted on the side image alone if you want to expand them, in the mid if you want to focus them, or identically to the mid and side. What you choose is definitely up to you, but I find that this is a great starting point more often than not. Last up, it's time to limit the signal. Now, whichever limiter that you use or you have is fine, but I love this Elephant limiter by Voxengo. It lets me control just about every parameter from the attack to release shape, the time, if the signal is expanded into the limiter, if the channels are linked, and so on. Regardless of the limiter, I'd recommend a release time above 100 milliseconds, channel linking around 60 to 80%, and only 3 dB of attenuation at most. If you have to attenuate more than that to get the LUFS that you want, then it's best to use your other processors to make the signal louder and more controlled before limiting it. For example, some additional upward processing combined with a little more peak attenuation will help you achieve a louder, more controlled sound. Measure the loudness with an LUFS meter, but most importantly, reassess the sound. Does it still sound the way that you want it to when all of the quieter details are pushed forward with the limiter? If not, check the tone shaping EQ. This is where you can easily reshape the sound and adjust the balance. So let's listen to this last EQ and the limiter being introduced. Get professional analog mastering that accurately translates what you hear in your head. Seriously though, when people work with us, they get results. That's why major industry professionals like Keith Urban's producer Aaron Schurz works with us, Grammy award-winning AJ Castillo, Billboard #1 charted artist Megan Lindsay, Grammy award-winning artist Tulis, The Voice singer Cody Ballou, Grammy-nominated producer Tyler Kane, Warner Music artist Ricky Young, and the list goes on. Why waste your time creating masters that don't accurately translate what you hear in your head when you could instantly fix a problem by clicking the link in the description and working directly with professionals who have already done what you're trying to do. We've mastered thousands of songs that accurately translate what each client hears in their head, and it'll work for you too. Click the link in the description now and get direct access to us for personalized analog mastering that accurately translates what you hear in your head.